So, let me just dive right into this one because there's a lot to unpack when we're talking about Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen. This is one of those movies that, love it or hate it, you absolutely cannot ignore. It came out in 2009, and man, did it make some noise, both literally and figuratively. I mean, we're talking about giant robots smashing each other to pieces, explosions that would make a fireworks factory jealous, and a plot that, well, we'll get to the plot. Trust me, we'll get there. Let me start with the basic premise because I think that's where most people either get on board or jump ship. The fundamental idea behind Revenge of the Fallen picks up roughly 2 years after the events of the first Transformers movie from 2007. Sam Witwicky, our everyman hero who somehow got tangled up in an intergalactic war between sentient robots, is trying to do what any normal American kid would do after saving the world. He's going to college. That's right. The guy who helped defeat Megatron, who watched Optimus Prime throw down in the streets of Los Angeles, who held the Allspark in his hands, is now packing his bags for freshman year. And honestly, there's something kind of hilarious about that premise when you think about it. Like, imagine writing that on your college application essay. What did you do last summer? Oh, helped an alien robot leader defeat his evil counterpart and saved human civilization. Also, I got a really cool car out of it. The car is also a robot. Admissions officers would either give you a full ride or call campus security. But here's where things get interesting, and by interesting, I mean absolutely bonkers. While Sam is packing for college, he finds a shard of the Allspark. You know, that cube thing from the first movie that was basically the source of all Cybertronian life. This little shard is clinging to his hoodie or whatever, and when he touches it, it does something to his brain. It starts downloading ancient Cybertronian symbols and knowledge directly into his head, and he doesn't even realize what's happening at first. He starts seeing these symbols everywhere. He's writing them on things. He's having visions. He's basically going through what looks like a mental breakdown, right as he's supposed to be starting his new independent life at college. And this is really the hook of the entire movie. Those symbols, that knowledge burned into Sam's mind, they're actually the key to finding an ancient weapon of unimaginable power, and both the Autobots and the Decepticons want what's inside his head. Now, the movie also introduces this concept that the Transformers have been visiting Earth for way longer than anyone realized. We're talking thousands of years. There's this whole ancient history element woven into the story where we learn that a group of ancient Transformers called the Primes, basically the original leaders of Cybertron, came to Earth millennia ago. They had these machines called sun harvesters that could, as the name rather ominously suggests, harvest the energy of suns. But there was a rule. You never destroy a sun that supports life. One of the Primes, who later became known as the Fallen, didn't care about that rule. He wanted to activate the sun harvester on Earth, which would have destroyed our sun and, by extension, all life on the planet. The other Primes stopped him and sacrificed themselves to hide the key to the sun harvester, a device called the Matrix of Leadership, so that the Fallen could never get his hands on it. And guess what? The location of the Matrix of Leadership is exactly what's been downloaded into Sam's brain. So yeah, no pressure or anything, Sam. Just go to college, make some friends, maybe join a study group, and oh, by the way, The fate of the entire solar system depends on what's rattling around in your skull. That's your premise in a nutshell. Ancient cosmic evil, a kid who just wants a normal life. Giant robots, a scavenger hunt across the globe for an artifact of immense power and enough explosions to register on the Richter scale. It's ambitious, it's sprawling, and it's the kind of premise that could either result in an epic masterpiece or a beautiful disaster. Depending on who you ask, Revenge of the Fallen manages to be both simultaneously, which is honestly kind of impressive in its own right. Now let's talk about the people and the robots, because in this franchise, the robots are absolutely people too, arguably more interesting people than the actual humans sometimes. The main characters of this film form this web of relationships and motivations that drive the whole thing forward, and even if the movie doesn't always give every character their due, there's a surprisingly large cast to keep track of. Front and center, obviously, is Sam Witwicky, played by Shia LaBeouf. Sam is our protagonist, our audience surrogate, our window into this insane world of Transformers. In the first movie, Sam was this awkward, fast-talking teenager who stumbled into an alien war almost by accident. He was relatable because he was just a regular kid dealing with extraordinarily irregular circumstances. In Revenge of the Fallen, the filmmakers try to evolve Sam a bit. He's heading to college. He's trying to have a long-distance relationship with Michaela. He's dealing with parents who are both proud and anxious about their son leaving the nest. And underneath all of that, he's carrying the trauma of having been in the middle of a literal war zone. There's this tension in Sam where he wants desperately to be normal, to leave the Transformers stuff behind, to just be a college student. But the universe keeps pulling him back in, and then when the Allspark shard starts messing with his brain, he can't escape it anymore. He becomes the most important person on the planet, whether he likes it or not, and watching him grapple with that responsibility, while also trying not to fail his astronomy class, is one of the more humanizing aspects of the film. Shia LaBeouf brings his characteristic intensity to the role. Say what you will about the man, and people have said a lot, but he commits to this part fully. The scenes where Sam is losing his grip, where the Cybertronian symbols are overwhelming his mind, where he's scrawling alien equations on everything in sight during class, LaBeouf plays those moments with a kind of frantic energy that makes you genuinely feel for the character. He's sweating, he's stammering, he's terrified, and it works. He's also still funny in that rapid-fire way that made him appealing in the first film, throwing out one-liners and reactions that feel spontaneous even if they were scripted. His chemistry with the other actors, particularly Megan Fox, is a key part of what makes the human storyline function at all. Because, let's be honest, in a movie full of 30-foot-tall robots beating the bolts out of each other, it's a tall order to make the audience care about the humans. LaBeouf mostly pulls it off. Then there's Michaela Baines, played by Megan Fox. Michaela is Sam's girlfriend, and her role in Revenge of the Fallen is both expanded and, frustratingly, somewhat limited at the same time. On the one hand, she's given more to do action-wise than in the first film. She's tough, she's resourceful, she's the one who actually captures and restrains a small Decepticon named Wheelie, who's been spying on her at her auto shop. She shows genuine bravery and capability throughout the film, particularly in the Egypt sequences where she's literally dragging Sam's body through a war zone. On the other hand, The camera does what the camera does in a Michael Bay movie when it comes to Megan Fox. And there are plenty of shots that are, shall we say, more interested in her physical appearance than her character development. It's a criticism that's been leveled at these movies since the beginning, and it's valid. Fox does good work with what she's given. There's a vulnerability to Michaela that Fox brings through, especially in the scenes where she's telling Sam she loves him and he can't bring himself to say it back. But you can't help feeling like the movie could have given her even more to work with. The relationship between Sam and Michaela is actually one of the emotional through lines of the film, and I think it's worth talking about because it's one of the things that gets lost in all the robot mayhem. There's this recurring thread where Michaela tells Sam she loves him, and he can't say it back, not because he doesn't feel it, but because he's scared. He's immature. He's an 18-year-old kid who doesn't know how to be vulnerable. It's actually a pretty realistic portrayal of young love, buried under layers of giant robot spectacle. By the end of the film, when Sam finally says those 3 words, it's meant to be this big emotional payoff. And whether or not you think the movie earns it depends largely on how invested you are in these characters amidst all the chaos. Now, let's talk about the Transformers themselves, because they're really the stars of the show, aren't they? Optimus Prime is back, and he's more badass than ever. Voiced by the legendary Peter Cullen. And I use the word legendary very deliberately because this man has been voicing Optimus since the 1984 cartoon, and his voice is Optimus Prime in a way that few actors are synonymous with their characters. Optimus in Revenge of the Fallen is a warrior philosopher who has been working alongside the U.S. military to hunt down remaining Decepticons on Earth. He leads a team called NEST, which is a joint human Autobot military unit, and he does it with that characteristic blend of wisdom, authority, and compassion that makes Optimus one of the most beloved characters in pop culture history. But here's the thing about Optimus in this movie. He dies. I know they brought him back. This is Transformers. Nobody stays dead. But his death scene is genuinely one of the most powerful moments in the entire film. It happens in this forest battle that is, hands down, one of the best action sequences in the franchise. Optimus takes on Megatron, Starscream, and Grindor simultaneously in this dense forest, and he's winning. He's absolutely dismantling them. He rips Grindor's face apart. He slashes Starscream's arm off. He's fighting like a cornered lion. And then Megatron stabs him through the chest from behind while Sam watches helplessly. It's brutal, it's shocking, and it's emotionally devastating in a way that a movie about toy robots probably shouldn't be, but absolutely is. Peter Cullen's final line before Optimus goes offline, "Sam, run," is delivered with such quiet determination that it gives you chills. And the scene afterward, where the Autobots gather around Optimus's lifeless body, where Ironhide and Ratchet and Bumblebee are standing there in silence, it's genuinely moving. Bay catches a lot of flack, much of it deserved, but he nailed that sequence. Optimus's death serves as the catalyst for the rest of the film. Without their leader, the Autobots are vulnerable. Without Optimus, the only Prime left alive, the Fallen can finally come to Earth. Because there's a whole thing about how only a Prime can defeat the Fallen. So Sam's quest to find the matrix of leadership becomes not just about stopping the Fallen, but about bringing Optimus back to life. It gives the whole scavenger hunt actual emotional stakes beyond just find the MacGuffin. Sam isn't just looking for an ancient artifact. He's trying to resurrect the being who gave his life to protect him. That's personal. That's powerful. And it works. Bumblebee, Sam's guardian and the Autobot, who's been with him since the beginning, is also a major presence in the film. Bumblebee still can't speak. His vocal processors are damaged, so he communicates through radio clips and music, which is honestly one of the more charming and creative character choices in the franchise. There's something endearing about a 20-foot-tall alien war machine who expresses his emotions through snippets of pop songs. When he's sad, he plays something mournful. When he's excited, he cranks up something upbeat. When he wants Sam to stop making out with Michaela in the car, he sprays them with windshield wiper fluid. It's funny, it's sweet, and it gives Bumblebee a personality that transcends the fact that he doesn't have traditional dialogue. On the villain side, Megatron returns after being resurrected by the Decepticons. Yes, he was at the bottom of the ocean. Yes, he was very much dead at the end of the first film. And yes, the Decepticons use a shard of the Allspark to bring him back. It's comic book logic. It's franchise logic. And honestly, was anyone expecting Megatron to stay dead? Hugo Weaving provides the voice again, and his Megatron is all snarling menace and barely contained rage. But here's an interesting wrinkle. Megatron, the supposedly unstoppable leader of the Decepticons, is actually subordinate to someone in this film. He's not the top dog anymore. He answers to the Fallen, his master, the ancient Prime, who went rogue, and you can tell it bothers him. There's a dynamic between Megatron and the Fallen that's almost like a resentful apprentice and a dismissive master. And it adds a layer to Megatron that makes him slightly more complex than just angry robot wants to destroy everything. The Fallen himself, voiced by Tony Todd, is the big bad of the movie, the title character, if you will. He's one of the original Primes, ancient beyond comprehension, with power that dwarfs even Megatron's. He's been hiding out in space, manipulating events from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to return to Earth and finish what he started thousands of years ago. As a villain, the Fallen is conceptually fascinating. This idea of an ancient evil that predates human civilization, that has been waiting patiently across millennia for its chance to destroy us. But in execution, he's a bit underwhelming. He doesn't get a ton of screen time, and when he finally shows up on Earth, his confrontation with the resurrected Optimus Prime is fairly brief. Optimus literally tears him apart in what feels like about 30 seconds of screen time. For a villain who's been built up for the entire movie, it's a somewhat anticlimactic end. Tony Todd's voice work is excellent. The guy sounds like ancient evil personified, but you wish the movie had given the Fallen more room to breathe as a character. Starscream, Megatron's treacherous second-in-command, is also present and doing his Starscream thing, which basically means being sniveling, conniving, and thoroughly untrustworthy. Charlie Adler voices Starscream in this film, and the character is true to his cartoon roots. He's always looking for an angle, always trying to position himself for power, and always getting smacked around by Megatron when he gets too uppity. There's a great dynamic between them, where Megatron clearly despises Starscream, but keeps him around because he's useful. And Starscream clearly wants Megatron gone, but doesn't have the courage or the power to do it himself. It's a toxic relationship that mirrors some very human dynamics. which is kind of brilliant for a couple of alien robots. Among the new Transformers introduced in this film, we have to talk about Jetfire, because he's one of the more memorable additions. Jetfire is an ancient Decepticon turned Autobot, a seeker who defected from the Decepticons because he believed they were wrong. He's been hiding on Earth disguised as a Blackbird SR-71 reconnaissance aircraft, and he's old, like really old. He walks with a cane. He has a beard made of metal. He farts parachutes. I'm not making that up. He literally deploys parachutes from his rear end as a visual gag. He's essentially the crotchety old grandpa of the Transformers. And Mark Ryan voices him with this wonderful British curmudgeonliness that makes him genuinely entertaining. Jetfire is the one who explains a lot of the mythology to Sam and his friends, including the history of the Fallen and the Sun Harvester and his sacrifice at the end, where he rips out his own spark and gives his parts to Optimus so that Optimus can power up and defeat the Fallen, is actually a really touching moment. This old warrior, tired of fighting, tired of living, choosing to give his remaining life force so that the good guys can win. It's Transformers doing genuine pathos, and it works way better than it probably should. Then there are Skids and Mudflap, the Autobot twins, and oh boy, do we need to talk about these two. They are, without question, the most controversial addition to the Transformers franchise. They're small, they bicker constantly, they're not very bright, and they have gold teeth. Speak in what can only be described as stereotypical urban slang, and one of them has a prominent gold bucktooth. The racial undertones, or let's be honest, overtones, were immediately called out by critics and audiences alike. Were they meant to be offensive? Probably not intentionally. Bay has said they were based on other comedy duos and that he let the voice actors improvise a lot. But the end result is a pair of characters that many people found racially insensitive, and it's a legitimate criticism that has stuck to this movie like glue. Beyond the controversy, they're also just not very funny. In a movie that's already struggling with pacing and focus, every scene with Skids and Mudflap feels like time that could have been better spent elsewhere. They have a fight scene with Devastator, the massive Constructicon combiner that's briefly entertaining, but otherwise, they're a drag on the movie. It's one of those things where you watch the film and think, did nobody in the production process raise their hand and say, hey, maybe we should rethink these guys? Apparently not. Or if they did, they were overruled. Either way, Skids and Mudflap remain the single most criticized element of Revenge of the Fallen, and honestly, it's hard to argue that the criticism isn't deserved. On the new Decepticon side, the most visually impressive addition is Devastator. If you're not familiar with Transformers lore, Devastator is a combiner, a massive robot formed when multiple smaller robots merge together. In this case, several construction vehicles called Constructicons combine to form this absolutely gargantuan monstrosity that literally climbs the Great Pyramid of Giza, tearing it apart in the process to reveal the Sun Harvester hidden inside. Devastator is enormous. He's terrifying, and the visual effects work required to bring him to life reportedly pushed the rendering capabilities of Industrial Light and Magic to their absolute limit. The sheer number of individual parts and pieces moving in every frame of Devastator's scenes was unprecedented at the time. As a visual spectacle, Devastator delivers. As a character, he's basically a force of nature with no personality, but honestly, that's fine. Not every villain needs a motivation speech. Sometimes you just need a building-sized robot vacuum cleaner eating everything in its path, and Devastator fills that role spectacularly. Let me also mention the human supporting cast, because they matter more than people sometimes give them credit for. John Turturro returns as Agent Simmons, the former Sector 7 agent from the first film. In Revenge of the Fallen, Simmons has been disgraced and is now working in a deli, but he gets pulled back into the action when Sam comes to him for help. Turturro is clearly having the time of his life in this role. He's eccentric, he's intense, he's wearing a thong in one scene, don't ask, and he provides a lot of the comic relief that actually works in this film. His chemistry with Sam is good, his rapport with Wheelie and Jetfire is entertaining, and he gets one of the film's more crowd-pleasing moments when he's the one who spots the sun harvester and calls in a military strike. Josh Duhamel and Tyrese Gibson return as Major Lennox and Sergeant Epps, respectively, the military heroes from the first film who are now leading Nest operations alongside the Autobots. They're solid in their roles. Duhamel brings a calm authority, and Tyrese brings energy and humor, but their characters are admittedly pretty thin. They're there to be competent soldiers, to shoot at Decepticons, and to look heroic doing it. They serve that function well, but don't go into this movie expecting deep character development from the military side of things. They're action movie soldiers through and through. Kevin Dunn and Julie White return as Sam's parents, Ron and Judy Witwicky, and they provide some of the film's broader comedy. Their scenes at Sam's college, particularly Judy's infamous pot brownie scene, where she accidentally eats marijuana-laced brownies and starts tackling people on the college campus, are either hilarious or cringe-inducing, depending on your tolerance for that kind of humor. I'll say this: Julie White commits to the bit. She is all in on the crazed, brownie-fueled campus rampage, and there's something admirable about an actress who's just going for it that hard. Is it sophisticated humor? Absolutely not. Is it funny in a broad, slapstick way? For some people, yes. Your mileage will vary. Ramon Rodriguez plays Leo Spitz, Sam's college roommate who runs a conspiracy theory website. Leo is basically the comic relief sidekick, and Rodriguez does his best with a role that's mostly about being scared, yelling, and running away from things. He's not a bad character per se, but he feels somewhat superfluous. You could remove Leo from the movie entirely, and very little would change plot-wise, which is never a great sign for a character. He exists primarily to give Sam someone to bounce off of in the college scenes and to provide another pair of eyes for the ordinary person reacting to insane robot stuff shots. He does get to tase a Decepticon at one point, which is a nice moment for him, but overall, Leo is one of the characters that makes you feel the movie's bloat. There's also Alice, played by Isabel Lucas, who is a Decepticon pretender, a transformer disguised as a human. She shows up at Sam's college as a seductive co-ed who throws herself at Sam, much to Michaela's displeasure, and then reveals herself to be a terrifying robot assassin. It's a fun concept. The idea that a transformer could disguise itself as a person rather than a vehicle, and the reveal is effective, but Alice doesn't stick around very long. She's dispatched fairly quickly once her true nature is revealed. What she does serve is to create tension between Sam and Michaela and to demonstrate that the Decepticons are getting creative in their tactics. It's also one of the movie's creepier sequences. This idea that the person hitting on you at a party might actually be an alien killing machine with a prehensile tongue. College dating was already nerve-wracking enough without adding "might be a robot" to the list of concerns. Now, let's get into the real meat of this thing, the plot. And here's where Revenge of the Fallen gets complicated, both narratively and in terms of audience reception. The plot of this movie is simultaneously too convoluted and too simple, which is a neat trick. On a macro level, it's straightforward. Bad guys want to blow up the sun. Good guys need to stop them. There's a MacGuffin that both sides are after. Simple. But the movie wraps that simple story in layers upon layers of mythology, subplots, comedy detours, and action set pieces that can make the whole thing feel overstuffed and occasionally incoherent. Let me try to walk through the major plot beats because I think understanding the structure helps you appreciate both what works and what doesn't. The movie opens with a prologue set in ancient times, showing us the original primes and their sun harvesters. We see the Fallen's betrayal and the other primes' sacrifice. This is actually a great opening. It establishes the stakes, it sets up the mythology, and it has a mythic, almost biblical quality to it. Then we jump to the present day, where Nest is conducting an operation in Shanghai, hunting down Decepticons that have been hiding around the world. This Shanghai sequence is our first major action scene, and it's a banger. Optimus drops out of a cargo plane. Sideswipe does this incredible rollerblade slide move where he cuts a Decepticon in half, and we get a car chase through Shanghai that's thrilling and visually spectacular. It also introduces the film's first major plot point. The Decepticons keep mentioning the Fallen before they die, and nobody knows what that means yet. It's a good mystery setup. From there, we move to Sam's world. He's getting ready for college, saying goodbye to Bumblebee, in a scene that's actually quite touching. Sam telling Bumblebee he can't bring a giant robot car to college, and Bumblebee getting sad about it, and accidentally discovering the All-Spark Shard. The shard zaps him, downloads the Cybertronian data into his brain, and also brings a bunch of kitchen appliances to life in one of the movie's more bizarre scenes. His mom's KitchenAid mixer tries to kill everyone, which is played for laughs, but also serves to show that all spark energy is still dangerous and unpredictable. Sam goes to college, and this is where the movie hits its first major rough patch pacing-wise. The college scenes try to balance several things at once: Sam's adjustment to college life, the all-spark knowledge taking over his brain, Leo's conspiracy theories, Alice's seduction attempt, and Michaela's visit. It's a lot, and the movie doesn't always handle the transitions gracefully. The pot brownie scene with Sam's mom happens here, and while it's memorable, it feels like it belongs in a different movie entirely. There's a tonal whiplash between alien symbols are driving our hero insane, and his mom is high on pot brownies and tackling strangers. Bay has always been a director who throws everything at the wall and sees what sticks. And in these college scenes, some of it sticks, and some of it very much doesn't. The plot kicks into gear when the Decepticons make their move. They resurrect Megatron using the All-Spark Shard, stolen by a tiny Decepticon called Wheelie. Actually, I think it was stolen by another small Decepticon, and I'm getting my wires crossed. But regardless, the Decepticons get their hands on a shard and use it to bring Megatron back. Megatron goes to meet the Fallen, who's been chilling on one of Saturn's moons. And the Fallen tells him what he needs, the knowledge in Sam's brain, which will lead them to the matrix of leadership, which will activate the Sun Harvester, which will destroy Earth's sun and generate enough energon to rebuild the Decepticon army. It's a chain of MacGuffins, each one leading to the next, like a scavenger hunt designed by a Cybertronian game show host. The Decepticons kidnap Sam. There's a great sequence in the forest where Optimus faces off against multiple Decepticons to protect Sam, which I already mentioned as one of the film's highlights. This is the fight where Optimus dies. After Optimus falls, the movie takes on a darker tone. The Autobots are demoralized. The U.S. government, under pressure, considers handing Sam over to the Decepticons. The Fallen broadcasts a message to the entire world demanding Sam be turned over. It's actually a pretty tense stretch of the film. This feeling that the good guys are losing, that hope is fading, that everything is going wrong. Sam, Michaela, Leo, and Simmons go on the run, trying to figure out what the symbols in Sam's head mean before the Decepticons can catch them. This is where Jetfire comes in. They find him in the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, specifically at the Annex in Virginia, though the movie has them walk out the back door and somehow end up in the Arizona desert, which is one of those geographic impossibilities that has become legendary among film fans. Like, did nobody look at a map? Did nobody say, hey, the Smithsonian is in D.C., and that's clearly a desert? It's become such a famous goof that it almost adds to the movie's charm in a so-bad-it's-good kind of way. Jetfire teleports them to Egypt. He has a space bridge ability, which is convenient, and that's where the final act of the movie takes place. The last 45 minutes or so of Revenge of the Fallen is essentially one continuous military battle in and around the pyramids of Giza, and it is, from a pure spectacle standpoint, absolutely enormous. We're talking U.S. military forces, Nest, the Autobots, all fighting against a massive Decepticon force. We're talking tanks, jets, paratroopers, naval destroyers, and a goddamn railgun being dropped in from space. We're talking Devastator climbing the Great Pyramid and being taken out by said railgun. We're talking Sam and Michaela running through the desert while explosions literally chase them. It is Michael Bay at his Michael Bay-est, and whether you find that thrilling or exhausting is really the litmus test for whether this movie works for you. During this final battle, Sam finds the matrix of leadership, which has crumbled to dust because, apparently, it chooses who is worthy. Kind of like Thor's hammer, but dustier. Sam is briefly killed by Megatron. Yes, Sam actually dies. And in a vision, the ancient primes appear to him and tell him that he has proven himself worthy through his courage and sacrifice. They restore the Matrix and bring him back to life. Sam uses the Matrix to resurrect Optimus Prime, and then Jetfire sacrifices himself to give Optimus additional weapons and the ability to fly. Powered-up Optimus, now dubbed Jet Power Optimus Prime, because toy marketing demands it, flies up to the Fallen and absolutely obliterates him. He tears the Fallen's face off. He rips out his spark. It's visceral and cathartic and over in about 30 seconds. Megatron and Starscream retreat, vowing to return, sequel bait. And the day is saved. Sam finally tells Michaela he loves her. The Autobots stand triumphantly. Credits roll. That's the plot. And I realize just laying it out like that makes it sound like it should work. And in many ways, It does. The broad strokes are compelling. An ancient evil returning, a reluctant hero on a quest, a fallen champion who needs to be resurrected, a ticking clock as the villain gets closer to his goal. These are classic storytelling elements. The problem isn't the skeleton of the plot, it's the flesh on the bones. The execution is where Revenge of the Fallen struggles. Let me break down what I mean by that, because I think a fair analysis of this movie requires looking at both what it does well and where it stumbles. Let's start with the good stuff, because there's more of it than the movie's harshest critics would have you believe. The action scenes in this movie are genuinely spectacular. Whatever else you can say about Michael Bay, and people say a lot, the man knows how to stage an action sequence. The forest battle where Optimus takes on 3 Decepticons simultaneously is not just great by Transformers standards, it's one of the best action scenes of the 2000s period. The choreography is clear enough to follow despite the complexity of the combatants. The sound design is thunderous and immersive. The emotional stakes are real because we know Sam is in danger, and the payoff, Optimus's death, is genuinely shocking. You don't expect the franchise's most iconic character to die in the middle of the second act, and it lands hard. The Egypt battle, while overlong, has moments of genuine awe. The scale of the combat is something that hadn't really been done before in a live-action film. Hundreds of soldiers, dozens of robots, aircraft carriers, fighter jets, and the pyramids of Giza as a backdrop. It's logistically insane, and the fact that it's as coherent as it is, and for the most part, you can follow who's fighting whom and what the objectives are, is a real achievement on a technical level. There's a shot where a naval destroyer fires a railgun round that travels across the entire desert and hits Devastator on top of the pyramid, and the sheer audacity of that image is something that sticks with you. Bay knows how to create images that burn themselves into your brain. The visual effects are also remarkable, and I think this is something that gets taken for granted when people discuss Revenge of the Fallen. Industrial Light and Magic did absolutely groundbreaking work on this film. The Transformers themselves have thousands of individually animated parts. Every transformation, every movement, every expression on their metallic faces is the result of incredibly complex digital animation, and it looks real. Despite the fact that these characters are entirely computer-generated, they have weight, they have presence, they interact with the physical environment in convincing ways. When Optimus steps on grass, the grass bends. When a Decepticon crashes through a building, the debris reacts naturally. When Bumblebee drives down a highway, the light reflects off his yellow paint job exactly the way it would off a real car. ILM won the Visual Effects Society Award for this film, and it was well deserved. The effects work in Revenge of the Fallen is, and I don't use this word lightly, extraordinary. Peter Cullen's vocal performance as Optimus Prime deserves special mention again because it really is that good. Cullen brings a gravitas to Optimus that elevates every scene the character is in. When Optimus talks about duty, about protection, about sacrifice, you believe him. You feel the weight of leadership on his shoulders. You understand why the other Autobots follow him, why Sam trusts him with his life, why the entire movie is essentially about getting Optimus back. There's a reason this character has endured for 4 decades and counting, and a huge part of that reason is Peter Cullen's voice. He makes Optimus noble without being preachy, strong without being invulnerable, and emotional without being sentimental. It's masterful voice acting. The score by Steve Jablonsky is another strong element. Jablonsky created a sweeping, bombastic, emotionally rich score that complements the action beautifully. The main Transformers theme is iconic at this point. That rising, heroic brass melody that plays whenever Optimus does something awesome. Jablonsky also brings more intimate pieces to the quieter moments, and his music during Optimus's death scene is genuinely heartbreaking. The soundtrack also includes Linkin Park's New Divide, which, like What I've Done from the first film, became synonymous with the Transformers franchise. It's a great song, perfectly suited to the tone of the movie, and it plays over the opening credits in a way that immediately gets you pumped for what's to come. Now, let's talk about where the movie stumbles, because honesty demands it, and there's quite a bit to discuss. The first and most frequently cited issue is the humor, or more specifically, the kind of humor. Revenge of the Fallen has a comedy problem. It's not that the movie isn't funny. There are genuinely amusing moments scattered throughout. It's that the humor is inconsistent in tone and often undermines the dramatic moments. You'll have a tense, emotionally charged scene followed immediately by a broad, slapstick gag, and the whiplash can be jarring. The skids and mudflap issue, which I've already discussed, is the most egregious example, but it extends beyond them. Wheelie humping Michaela's leg, Sam's mom on pot brownies, a small Decepticon humping Michaela's leg too, John Turturro in a thong, Leo screaming and running, a Decepticon with wrecking ball-shaped testicles that Simmons comments on. Yes, Devastator has visible robot testicles, and yes, a character in the movie draws attention to. These moments of juvenile humor clash badly with the movie's attempts at epic, mythological storytelling. You're asking the audience to take seriously a plot about ancient primes and solar system-ending weapons, while also asking them to laugh at robot testicles. Those two things don't live comfortably in the same movie, and the humor ends up cheapening the drama more often than enhancing it. The pacing is another significant issue. Revenge of the Fallen runs 2 hours and 30 minutes, and it feels every minute of it. The first act, the college stuff, drags in places because it's trying to service too many comedy subplots. The second act, the hunt for the Matrix, is actually fairly well paced, with the Jetfire exposition scenes providing good momentum. But the third act, the Egypt battle, is simply too long. Battle fatigue is a real thing in movies, and when you've been watching non-stop combat for 45 minutes, even the most spectacular explosions start to lose their impact. The audience gets desensitized, and moments that should be thrilling start feeling routine. A tighter edit, maybe trimming 15 to 20 minutes, could have made the film significantly more effective. The plot has logical issues that, while not necessarily deal-breakers in a giant robot movie, accumulate to the point where they become distracting. The Smithsonian to desert geography gaffe I already mentioned. The inconsistency in the Transformers' sizes. Characters seem to change size between scenes depending on what the visual effects team needed. The fact that Sam is killed and then resurrected by the Primes feels like a deus ex machina, literally gods from the machine, that undercuts the stakes. If death can just be reversed, does it really matter? The movie tries to frame it as Sam earning his resurrection through his bravery and selflessness, and on an emotional level, it works okay. But logically, It opens up all sorts of questions about why the primes couldn't have just intervened earlier or in different ways. There's also the issue of character density. There are so many Transformers in this movie, both Autobots and Decepticons, that many of them are essentially set dressing. Sideswipe, who has that amazing introductory scene in Shanghai, barely appears afterward. Arcee, the female Autobot motorcycle trio, shows up for the Egypt battle and is apparently killed with little fanfare. Jolt, a blue Autobot, is in the movie for what feels like about 45 seconds total. On the Decepticon side, there are dozens of drones and warriors who are essentially cannon fodder. The movie introduces all these characters and then doesn't have the time or inclination to develop most of them. It's a problem that would plague the franchise going forward. The roster gets bigger, but the character development gets thinner. Let me also address the pacing of the narrative in terms of how it handles its dual storylines. You've got Sam's personal journey, his relationship with Michaela, his struggle with the Allspark knowledge, his coming-of-age arc, running parallel to the cosmic Transformers mythology, the Fallen, the Primes, the Sun Harvester. When these two storylines intersect, the movie sings. The forest battle, where Sam's personal stakes, surviving, protecting the people he loves, meet the cosmic stakes, Optimus, the last Prime, being killed, is the movie at its best, precisely because the personal and the epic are unified. But when the storylines run separately, there's a disconnect. The cosmic stuff is fascinating but impersonal. Sam's personal stuff is relatable but can feel trivial against the backdrop of an intergalactic war. The movie doesn't always find the right balance, and there are stretches where you're watching one storyline and wishing you were watching the other. Now let's shift gears and talk about the people behind the camera, because the creative team behind Revenge of the Fallen is a huge part of understanding why the movie turned out the way it did. Michael Bay directed the film, and I feel like you can't discuss any Transformers movie without discussing Michael Bay, because his fingerprints are on every single frame. Bay is one of the most commercially successful directors in Hollywood history. His films have collectively grossed billions of dollars worldwide. Bad Boys, The Rock, Armageddon, Pearl Harbor, the Transformers franchise. The man has an almost supernatural ability to create movies that people will pay to see, regardless of what critics say. And Revenge of the Fallen is perhaps the purest distillation of the Michael Bay experience. It has everything that defines his style: the low-angle hero shots with the sun setting behind the characters, the military hardware porn. Bay loves filming real military equipment and gets full cooperation from the Department of Defense. The frenetic editing, the bombastic score, the beautiful people looking beautiful while things explode around them, and the overwhelming sense that everything is turned up to 11 at all times. Bay's approach to filmmaking is fundamentally maximalist: more explosions, more robots, more spectacle, bigger, louder, faster. It's an approach that creates visually stunning moments, but can also exhaust the audience and drown out subtlety. There's a famous quote from Bay where he essentially says he makes movies for teenage boys, and while that's a bit reductive, it does explain a lot about the tonal choices in Revenge of the Fallen. The crude humor, the emphasis on visual spectacle over narrative complexity, the treatment of female characters as objects of desire first and people second, these are all choices that align with a certain adolescent sensibility. Whether that's a legitimate artistic approach or a limitation depends on your perspective, but it's undeniably what Bay was going for. It's worth noting that Revenge of the Fallen was made under extremely challenging circumstances. The 2007 to 2008 Writers Guild of America strike hit during pre-production, which meant that the script was not finished when filming began. Bay has been open about this, saying that the writers, Roberto Orci, Alex Kurtzman, and Aaron Kruger, had to work on the story and dialogue right up to and sometimes during shooting. This goes a long way toward explaining some of the movie's structural issues. When you're essentially writing the movie as you're filming it, consistency and narrative cohesion are going to suffer. Scenes were conceived on the fly, dialogue was improvised or hastily written, and the overall structure had to be shaped in the editing room rather than on the page. It's kind of amazing that the movie is as coherent as it is, honestly. Plenty of movies with finished scripts and long development periods have turned out worse. Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman, who wrote the first Transformers film and co-wrote Revenge of the Fallen with Aaron Kruger, are interesting figures in the blockbuster screenwriting world. They're prolific. Their credits include the 2009 Star Trek reboot, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and multiple other franchise films. And they specialize in the kind of mythology-heavy, exposition-dense storytelling that big franchise movies require. For Revenge of the Fallen, they created the expanded Transformers mythology involving the Primes, the Fallen, the Sun Harvester, and the Matrix of Leadership. This mythology is actually really cool and gives the franchise a sense of history and depth that the first film lacked. The idea that the Transformers have this ancient, almost religious history with Earth is compelling and could have sustained a really interesting story. The challenge was translating that mythology into a screenplay under enormous time pressure, with a director who prioritizes spectacle over story, and a studio that needs the movie to hit a specific release date regardless of whether the script is ready. Under those circumstances, the fact that the story holds together at all is a credit to their skill, even if the seams are visible. Aaron Kruger, who joined as the third screenwriter, would go on to be the sole credited writer on the next two Transformers films, Dark of the Moon and Age of Extinction, and his involvement in Revenge of the Fallen marks the beginning of the franchise's shift toward more convoluted mythology and away from the relatively straightforward storytelling of the first film. Kruger has a background in horror and thriller screenwriting. He wrote The Ring and Arlington Road, among others. And you can see some of his sensibilities in the darker elements of Revenge of the Fallen, the ancient evil, the conspiracy, the sense of impending doom. The film was produced by Steven Spielberg as executive producer, Lorenzo di Bonaventura, Tom DeSanto, and Don Murphy, among others. Spielberg's involvement in the Transformers franchise is one of those Hollywood stories that sounds too good to be true. Spielberg, the man who made Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan, executive producing a movie about toy robots. But Spielberg has always been a showman at heart, and he was the one who handpicked Bay to direct the first film, seeing in Bay's maximalist style the perfect fit for bringing the Transformers to life. Spielberg's role on these films is primarily one of oversight. He provides notes on the story and the cut. He helps guide the overall direction. But his name carries enormous weight in terms of getting the project greenlit and attracting talent, having Steven Spielberg Presents above the title opens doors that few other names can. Lorenzo de Bonaventura is the producer who really shepherds the day-to-day production. He's a former Warner Brothers executive who moved into producing, and the Transformers franchise is his crown jewel. De Bonaventura is the one dealing with Hasbro, who owns the Transformers brand and has significant creative input, managing the budget, coordinating with the studio, Paramount Pictures, and generally keeping the massive production machinery running. For a film like Revenge of the Fallen, with its globe-trotting locations, massive cast, extensive visual effects, and compressed timeline, the producing job is Herculean. The film's production involved shooting on location in several countries, including the United States, Egypt, Jordan, and France. The Egypt and Jordan sequences, which comprise the film's climactic battle, required extensive cooperation with local governments and involved hundreds of crew members, military vehicles, and elaborate practical effects. Bay's preference for practical effects whenever possible, real explosions, real military hardware, real stunts, gives the film a tactile quality that pure CGI can't replicate. When you see a building explode in a Michael Bay movie, there's a good chance that a building actually exploded. When you see a car flip through the air, there's a good chance that a real car was really flipped. This commitment to practical filmmaking, combined with ILM's digital magic, gives Revenge of the Fallen its distinctive visual power. The cinematography was done by Ben Saracen, who took over from the first film's cinematographer, Mitchell Amundsen. Saracen brought a slightly different visual sensibility to the sequel, and it shows. The movie has a warmer, more saturated color palette than the first film, particularly in the desert sequences, where the golden sand and harsh sunlight create a striking contrast with the metallic blues and reds of the Transformers. Saracen's work is particularly impressive in the action sequences, where the camera moves with a fluid, dynamic energy that keeps up with the chaos without losing visual clarity. Most of the time, at least, there are moments, particularly in the more frenetic battle scenes, where the editing and camera movement can make it hard to tell what's happening, but these are relatively rare given the complexity of what's being depicted. Bay's use of lighting in the film deserves its own discussion because it's one of the most distinctive visual elements. Bay loves golden hour, that magical time just before sunset when the light is warm and directional and makes everything look beautiful. Many of the film's most iconic shots are bathed in this golden light. Optimus standing against a sunset, Sam and Michaela silhouetted against a desert sky, the pyramids glowing in the late afternoon sun. It gives the film a painterly quality that contrasts interestingly with the mechanical, hard-edged design of the robots. There's also heavy use of high-contrast lighting in the darker scenes, deep shadows, bright highlights, lots of rim lighting on characters' faces. It's a style that makes everything look dramatic and cinematic, even mundane dialogue scenes. You could screenshot almost any frame of a Michael Bay movie and it would look like a movie poster. Whether that's substance or just style is debatable, but it's undeniably effective on a visual level. The use of color is also deliberate and meaningful, at least to the extent that a Michael Bay movie is interested in symbolism. The Autobots are generally depicted in brighter, warmer colors. Optimus's iconic red and blue, Bumblebee's yellow, Ratchet's lime green, while the Decepticons tend toward darker, more menacing color schemes: silver, black, gunmetal gray. This color coding helps the audience distinguish friend from foe during battle scenes, which is crucial when you've got dozens of robots on screen at once. The desert environment of the final act provides a neutral canvas that allows both the warm Autobot colors and the cold Decepticon colors to pop. It's smart, visual storytelling, even if it's not the kind of thing most viewers consciously notice. The movie runs approximately 150 minutes, 2 hours and 30 minutes, making it significantly longer than the first film's 143 minutes. This runtime is both a selling point and a drawback. On one hand, fans who love the spectacle get more of it. On the other hand, the length contributes to the pacing issues I mentioned earlier. The first Transformers film felt lean and propulsive. Revenge of the Fallen feels indulgent and occasionally bloated. A tighter cut could have addressed many of the film's pacing problems, but Bay is not a director known for restraint. He wants everything in the movie, and Paramount was not about to tell the director of their most profitable franchise to trim his film when audiences were going to show up regardless. Now let's talk about how the movie was received, because the gap between its commercial performance and its critical reception is genuinely fascinating and tells us a lot about the state of blockbuster filmmaking in the late 2000s. Commercially, Revenge of the Fallen was a juggernaut. It opened to $108.9 million domestically. At the time, the second largest opening ever for a film that wasn't a sequel to Spider-Man. It went on to gross over $836 million worldwide, making it the second highest grossing film of 2009, behind only Avatar. Let me put that in perspective. In a year that included Avatar, Harry Potter, and the Half-Blood Prince, Up, Star Trek, and The Hangover, Revenge of the Fallen outperformed almost all of them. People showed up. They showed up in enormous numbers. They showed up on opening weekend. They showed up the second weekend. They showed up through the entire summer. The Transformers brand, combined with the spectacle promise of a Michael Bay sequel, was simply irresistible to a massive global audience. In terms of pure box office performance, Revenge of the Fallen was an unqualified success. It made an absolute fortune for Paramount, for Hasbro, for everyone involved in its production. Critically, however, it was a very different story. Revenge of the Fallen was savaged by critics. It currently holds a 20% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, based on over 250 reviews. That's bad. That's really bad. The critical consensus, as stated on the site, describes it as a visually stunning but narratively incoherent blockbuster that sacrifices story and character for spectacle. Individual reviews were even harsher. Roger Ebert gave it 1 star out of 4 and wrote one of his most famously scathing reviews, calling it a horrible experience of unendurable length and describing it as like watching a 2.5-hour explosion. Other critics used words like bloated, incoherent, juvenile, and exhausting. The film was nominated for 7 Razzie Awards, the annual ceremony that honors the worst in cinema, and won 3, including Worst Picture. It's one of the highest-grossing films ever to win Worst Picture, which is an interesting distinction. The critical drubbing is understandable, but I also think it deserves some context. Film critics, by and large, are evaluating movies on criteria that Revenge of the Fallen isn't really interested in meeting. Narrative coherence, character depth, thematic sophistication, subtlety. These are the things that critics value and that the film largely ignores in favor of spectacle, sensation, and sheer, overwhelming audiovisual force. That doesn't make the critics wrong. These are valid criteria for evaluating a movie. But it does explain the disconnect between the critical response and the audience response. Audiences weren't going to Revenge of the Fallen for narrative sophistication. They were going for giant robots fighting, and on that front, the movie delivers. It's like criticizing a roller coaster for not having a compelling narrative. You're not wrong, but you might be missing the point. That said, audience reception was more mixed than the box office numbers might suggest. The cinema score, a measure of audience satisfaction, was a B+, which is solid but not overwhelming for a blockbuster of this size. Many audiences who enjoyed the spectacle in the theater came out with reservations about the plot, the humor, and the length. Fan communities were divided, with some praising the action and visual effects, while others criticized the story, the comedy, and the treatment of certain characters. The love it or hate it dynamic that defines the Transformers franchise was in full effect with Revenge of the Fallen, perhaps more so than with any other entry. Let me try to articulate the film's strengths and weaknesses in a more structured way, because I think that's useful for anyone trying to decide whether this movie is for them. The strengths are significant and shouldn't be dismissed. First, the action. The action in Revenge of the Fallen is, at its best, genuinely extraordinary. The forest battle is an all-timer. The Egypt battle, while too long, has moments of jaw-dropping spectacle. The Shanghai opening is a thrilling set piece that immediately grabs your attention. Bay's ability to orchestrate complex action involving both practical and digital elements is virtually unmatched in Hollywood, and Revenge of the Fallen showcases this ability at its peak. Second, the visual effects. As I've discussed, ILM's work on this film is nothing short of remarkable. The Transformers look incredible, detailed, textured, convincingly integrated into real environments. The transformations are fluid and complex. The scale is awe-inspiring, from the intimate detail of Optimus's facial expressions to the city block-sized enormity of Devastator. This movie pushed the boundaries of what was possible in visual effects, and the results are still impressive today, more than 15 years later. Third, the emotional core. Despite all the chaos and crude humor, there is a genuine emotional through line in this movie, and it works more often than it doesn't. Sam's journey from reluctant hero to willing sacrifice is compelling. His relationship with Michaela, while imperfectly rendered, has real warmth. Optimus's death and resurrection carry genuine emotional weight. Jetfire's sacrifice is touching. Bumblebee's loyalty to Sam is heartwarming. These moments of genuine feeling are what elevate Revenge of the Fallen above pure spectacle and give the audience something to care about amidst the explosions. Fourth, Peter Cullen. I keep coming back to this because I genuinely believe his vocal performance is one of the best things about the entire Transformers franchise, not just this film. Cullen's Optimus Prime is a character for the ages, and in Revenge of the Fallen, he gets some of his finest moments. The forest battle, his death scene, his resurrection, his final confrontation with the Fallen. Cullen brings everything to these scenes, and they're better for it. Fifth, the mythology. The expanded lore about the Primes, the Fallen, the Sun Harvester, and the ancient connection between the Transformers and Earth is genuinely interesting. It gives the franchise a sense of history and depth that enriches the universe. The idea of Earth as a battleground in a cosmic war that predates human civilization is a powerful concept, and Revenge of the Fallen is the film that introduced it to the franchise. Now, the weaknesses. First and foremost, the humor. I've beaten this drum already, but it bears repeating. The comedy in this movie is its Achilles heel. Skids and Mudflap are offensive and unfunny. The sexual humor is juvenile. The slapstick is tonally inconsistent with the epic storytelling the film is trying to do. Not all the humor is bad. Turturro is genuinely amusing, Bumblebee has some charming moments, and even some of Sam's rapid-fire dialogue gets laughs. But the ratio of good comedy to bad comedy is not favorable, and the bad comedy actively damages the movie. Second, the pacing. 2.5 hours is too long for this story. The college section drags. The Egypt battle, while spectacular, goes on past the point of diminishing returns. A leaner, meaner cut of this film, say around 2 hours, could have been significantly more effective. Third, the plot logic. The geographic impossibilities, the size inconsistencies, the deus ex machina resurrection, the chain of MacGuffins, these things add up. No individual issue is movie-breaking, but collectively, they create a sense of sloppiness that undermines the film's more ambitious narrative aspirations. Fourth, character development, or the lack thereof. Sam gets an arc, sort of. Optimus gets emotional moments, but not much of an arc. Michaela is underserved despite Megan Fox's efforts. The supporting Autobots are barely characters at all. The human military characters are functional, but paper-thin. In a movie with this many characters, very few of them feel like actual people, or actual robots, as the case may be. Fifth, the treatment of female characters. This is a Michael Bay movie, and Bay's track record with female characters is, to put it charitably, not great. Michaela is shot and lit like a music video model more often than she's shot like a character. Alice exists primarily as a seduction threat. Sam's mom is played for broad comedy. There's a general sense that the women in this movie exist primarily to be looked at or to support the male characters' arcs, and it's a limitation that the film never overcomes. Despite all of these issues, here's my honest assessment. Revenge of the Fallen is a movie that knows exactly what it is and delivers exactly what it promises. It promises giant robots fighting, and it delivers giant robots fighting better than almost any movie ever made. It promises spectacle, and the spectacle is jaw-dropping. It promises to make you feel like a 12-year-old kid smashing action figures together in the backyard. And for significant stretches of its runtime, it absolutely succeeds at that. Is it a great movie in the traditional sense? No. Is it a good movie? That depends on what you're looking for. Is it an entertaining movie? For many people, emphatically yes. I think the most honest recommendation I can give is this. If you loved the first Transformers movie and you want more of the same, but bigger and louder and crazier, you'll probably enjoy Revenge of the Fallen. The action is better, the visual effects are more impressive, the mythology is deeper, and the emotional stakes are higher. If you had reservations about the first film's comedy, or its treatment of certain characters, those issues are amplified here, and you'll likely be more bothered by them. And if you have no particular feelings about Transformers one way or the other, but you enjoy big, bombastic popcorn entertainment, there's enough here to justify the time investment. Just maybe grab a comfortable seat and prepare yourself for the length. What I find interesting about Revenge of the Fallen in retrospect is how it fits into the broader landscape of blockbuster filmmaking. This movie came out in 2009, the same year as Avatar, Star Trek, and District 9. It was a year that represented both the old guard and the new guard of blockbuster filmmaking. Avatar was about to change the game with its 3D technology and environmental themes. Star Trek was a reboot that proved you could honor a franchise's legacy while making it fresh and accessible. District 9 showed that science fiction could be smart, socially conscious, and still thrilling. And then there was Revenge of the Fallen, which represented the pure, unadulterated blockbuster approach. Don't overthink it. Don't get too subtle. Just deliver the biggest, loudest, most spectacular show possible and let the audience's senses do the rest. It's an approach that works commercially. The box office proves that, but it also has a ceiling, and Revenge of the Fallen is what that ceiling looks like. It's the maximum expression of a particular kind of filmmaking, and whether you see that as a triumph or a cautionary tale says a lot about your relationship with blockbuster cinema. Let me also talk a little bit about the franchise context, because Revenge of the Fallen doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's the second film in what would eventually become a sprawling franchise that includes 5 Michael Bay-directed films and 2 additional films directed by other filmmakers, Bumblebee by Travis Knight and Rise of the Beasts by Stephen Caple Jr. Within that franchise, Revenge of the Fallen occupies an interesting position. It's the film that expanded the mythology, that introduced the primes and the ancient history, that established the idea of Transformers as beings with a deep cosmic significance rather than just cool alien robots. Many of the concepts introduced in Revenge of the Fallen, the primes, the matrix of leadership, the ancient history with Earth, would become central to the franchise going forward. In that sense, the film was foundational, even if the execution was flawed. It's also the film that crystallized the critical backlash against the franchise. The first Transformers film received mixed to positive reviews, not glowing, but generally acknowledging that it was fun, well-crafted popcorn entertainment. Revenge of the Fallen is where the critics turned against the series, and they never really came back. Every subsequent Bay-directed Transformers film received increasingly hostile reviews, and the franchise's critical reputation never recovered until Bumblebee, which took a completely different approach under a different director. Revenge of the Fallen, for better or worse, is the film that defined the public perception of the Transformers franchise as visually spectacular, but narratively and comedically challenged. Among fans, the film's reputation has mellowed somewhat over the years. The initial reaction was divisive, with many fans frustrated by the humor, the plot issues, and the treatment of beloved characters, while others defended the film for its action, its visual effects, and its expansion of the mythology. Over time, as subsequent Transformers films came out and had their own issues, Age of Extinction and The Last Knight, in particular, are generally considered weaker entries. Revenge of the Fallen started to look better in comparison. The forest battle has been re-evaluated as one of the franchise's defining moments. Optimus's death and resurrection arc is recognized as the emotional peak of the Bay films. And the sheer ambition of the film, its scale, its scope, its visual complexity, has been more appreciated as audiences have gained perspective on what goes into making a movie of this magnitude. There's also been a cultural reassessment of Michael Bay's filmmaking in general. For years, Bay was treated as a punchline by critics and cinephiles, the poster child for everything wrong with Hollywood blockbusters. But in recent years, there's been a growing appreciation for what Bay actually does well: his visual compositions, his practical effects work, his ability to create kinetic, visceral action. These are genuine skills that deserve recognition. Filmmakers like Christopher Nolan and George Miller have acknowledged Bay's influence on blockbuster filmmaking, and a new generation of critics has started to look at his work with fresh eyes. This doesn't mean Revenge of the Fallen is suddenly a masterpiece. It very much isn't. But it does mean that the film is being evaluated more fairly than it was in the immediate aftermath of its release. I want to circle back to the visual style one more time because I think it's genuinely one of the most interesting aspects of the film, even if you don't enjoy the movie as a whole. Bay's visual approach in Revenge of the Fallen is heavily influenced by several things: military photography, sports photography, car advertising, and music video aesthetics. The low-angle shots looking up at characters and robots, making them look heroic and imposing. The tracking shots following vehicles as they speed through environments. The slow-motion shots of debris flying through the air, catching the light in beautiful patterns. The extreme wide shots establishing the scale of the action, then cutting to extreme close-ups for emotional beats. It's a visual language that Bay has refined over decades, and in Revenge of the Fallen, it's operating at peak efficiency. There's a particular technique Bay uses that I think is underappreciated: the Bay shot, where the camera circles around a character who's standing heroically, while the background rotates behind them, often with the sun or some other dramatic light source, creating a halo effect. This shot has been parodied countless times, and it has become shorthand for over-the-top blockbuster filmmaking. But when Bay does it, it genuinely works. There's a moment in Revenge of the Fallen where Optimus Prime stands triumphant after a battle, and the camera does this circling movement around him as the sun sets behind him, and despite yourself, despite every cynical instinct, you feel something. You feel awe. You feel admiration for this character. It's manipulative filmmaking, absolutely, but it's effective manipulative filmmaking, and there's an art to that. The use of IMAX cameras for certain sequences in Revenge of the Fallen was also notable. Several key action scenes were shot on IMAX film, giving them an expanded aspect ratio and significantly higher resolution when projected in IMAX theaters. The forest battle and portions of the Egypt battle were shot in IMAX, and the difference is dramatic. The IMAX sequences have a clarity and impact that standard sequences can't match, and they were a major selling point for the film's theatrical release. Bay was one of the early adopters of IMAX cameras for narrative filmmaking, alongside Christopher Nolan, who used them for The Dark Knight. And his use of the format helped establish IMAX as a premium theatrical experience for blockbuster films. The sound design in the film, while not something most people consciously think about, is a crucial part of why the action scenes are so effective. The sound team created unique sonic identities for each Transformer, Optimus's heavy, resonant footsteps are different from Bumblebee's lighter, faster movements, which are different from Megatron's harsh, aggressive sounds. The transformation sound, that iconic mechanical whirring and clicking that plays every time a transformer changes form, is one of the most recognizable sound effects in modern cinema. And the battle sounds, the impacts, the explosions, the weapon fire, are layered and textured in ways that create a genuinely immersive experience, especially in a well-equipped theater. The sound design won multiple awards and nominations, and rightly so. It's one of the unsung heroes of the Transformers franchise. All right, I want to talk about some specific scenes and moments that I think deserve deeper analysis because there are individual sequences in Revenge of the Fallen that are genuinely remarkable, even if the movie as a whole is imperfect. The Shanghai opening is a masterclass in action filmmaking efficiency. In under 10 minutes, it establishes the current state of the world. Nest is active, Decepticons are hiding, the alliance between humans and Autobots is functioning, but under pressure. Introduces several new characters. Sideswipe, the RC sisters, Demolishor, delivers two spectacular action sequences, the highway chase and Optimus's skydive, and plants the seeds of the film's central mystery, the Decepticons' dying words about the Fallen. It's lean, it's kinetic, and it wastes not a single frame. If the entire movie had been paced like the Shanghai opening, Revenge of the Fallen would be a much tighter, more effective film. The forest battle, which I've mentioned multiple times and which I make no apologies for continuing to praise, is worth examining in more detail. What makes it work so well? Several things. First, the environment. Filming a giant robot fight in a dense forest was a bold choice because it constrains the action. The trees limit the combatants' mobility, they create natural obstacles and cover, and they provide a constant sense of scale. These robots are so big that they're knocking down ancient trees as they fight. It's more intimate than an open battlefield fight, and that intimacy increases the tension. Second, the choreography. You can actually follow what's happening in this fight, which is not always the case in Transformers action scenes. Optimus's fighting style is distinctive. He's aggressive, he's skilled, he uses blades and fists and sheer brute force, and the camera gives you clear sight lines so you can appreciate his prowess. There's a moment where Optimus takes on all three Decepticons at once, moving fluidly between opponents, and it's choreographed with a grace and precision that elevates it beyond mere spectacle into something approaching martial arts cinema. It's beautiful, in a violent, destructive kind of way. Third, the emotional stakes. Sam is in the forest. Sam could die at any moment. Optimus is fighting not just to win, but to protect someone he cares about. And that motivation gives the fight an urgency that pure robot-on-robot combat can't match. When Optimus falls, it's not just the death of a warrior, it's the failure of a protector. He couldn't save Sam from danger. He could only save him from death by giving his own life. That sacrifice is the core of Optimus's character, and the forest battle embodies it perfectly. Fourth, the death itself. Megatron stabbing Optimus from behind while Optimus is focused on protecting Sam is dramatically effective because it's both shocking and inevitable. You should have seen it coming. It's a 3-on-1 fight, and even Optimus can't watch every angle. But in the heat of the action, the blow catches you off guard. And the aftermath, with Sam screaming and the Autobots arriving too late is genuinely tragic. It's the moment where the movie earns its emotional credibility and everything that follows: the quest for the Matrix, the journey to Egypt, the final battle is powered by the emotional engine that the forest battle creates. The jet fire scenes are another highlight for completely different reasons. After the intensity of the forest battle and the tension of Sam's flight from the Decepticons, the jet fire sequences provide a welcome change of pace. They're funny, they're informative, and they're anchored by a character who's instantly likable, despite being a cranky, decrepit old robot. The scene where Sam and company first encounter Jetfire in the Smithsonian and he stumbles around, bumping into exhibits, mumbling about being too old for this, is comedy gold. It's the kind of humor that actually works in this movie because it's character-based rather than gross-out-based. Jetfire is funny because of who he is, not because he's doing something crude. Jetfire's exposition about the Primes, the Fallen, and the Sun Harvester is also the most efficient and effective piece of storytelling in the film. In a few minutes, he lays out the entire mythology in a way that's clear, compelling, and emotionally engaging. The visual representation of his story, the animated depictions of ancient events, is stylish and effective. And his personal connection to the story, he was there, he lived through these events, he's carrying the guilt and weight of that history, gives the exposition an emotional dimension that prevents it from feeling like a dry info dump. Now, I want to address something that comes up frequently in discussions of Revenge of the Fallen: the accusation that it's a dumb movie. This is a charge that gets leveled at a lot of blockbusters, and I think it deserves some pushback. Is Revenge of the Fallen intellectually stimulating? Not particularly. Does it challenge the audience's assumptions or make them think deeply about the human condition? Not really. But does not intellectually stimulating equal dumb? I'm not sure that's a fair equivalency. There's a certain kind of intelligence in what Revenge of the Fallen does. Creating action sequences of this complexity, coordinating practical effects with digital effects, managing a cast of dozens of characters across multiple continents, designing and animating robots with thousands of moving parts, scoring and editing and mixing a film of this scale, none of that is easy, and all of it requires enormous skill and intelligence. The intelligence in Revenge of the Fallen is technical rather than narrative, visual rather than literary, visceral rather than cerebral. It's a different kind of intelligence, but it's intelligence nonetheless. Moreover, the movie's mythology, the Primes, the ancient war, the Sun Harvester, actually contain some genuinely interesting ideas. The notion of technology so advanced that it borders on the divine, the ethical question of whether it's acceptable to destroy a world for the sake of energy production, which, if you think about it, has real-world environmental parallels. The idea of a ruling class that corrupts its own principles, the fallen as a leader who betrayed his brothers. These are all rich thematic veins that the movie touches upon, even if it doesn't fully mine them. A more thoughtful filmmaker might have drawn these themes out more explicitly, but the raw material is there. Let me also touch on the film's legacy in terms of its impact on the blockbuster landscape. Revenge of the Fallen, along with the first Transformers film, helped establish the template for the modern franchise blockbuster. The idea of building a cinematic universe around a toy brand, the integration of military cooperation and recruitment messaging. The Department of Defense essentially gets a 2.5-hour recruitment commercial in exchange for providing real military hardware. The emphasis on global box office, particularly China, where the Transformers franchise has been enormously popular. The synergy between the films and the toy lines. Every new Transformer introduced in the films means new toys to sell. These are all elements that have been adopted by other franchises and that have shaped the way Hollywood approaches blockbuster filmmaking. The Transformers franchise's success also demonstrated that you don't need critical approval to make money. This sounds obvious in retrospect, but in the late 2000s, there was still a belief in some quarters that bad reviews would eventually catch up with the franchise. Revenge of the Fallen disproved that theory conclusively. It was one of the worst reviewed films of 2009 and one of the highest grossing. It proved that spectacle, brand recognition, and marketing could override critical consensus, at least in the short term. This lesson was not lost on Hollywood, and it arguably contributed to the risk-averse, franchise-dependent approach that has dominated the industry in the years since. I find myself coming back to a question that I think is at the heart of any discussion about Revenge of the Fallen. Does execution matter more than ambition? Or does ambition matter more than execution? The movie is incredibly ambitious. Its scope, its scale, its visual complexity, its mythological depth. But its execution is flawed. The humor misfires. The pacing is off. The characters are underdeveloped. The plot logic is shaky. Do you judge the movie by what it's trying to do or by what it actually achieves? And the answer, I think, is that it depends on the viewer. Some people will forgive a lot of execution problems if the ambition is sufficiently impressive. Others will hold the movie to a higher standard regardless of its ambitions. Neither perspective is wrong, and I think that's why Revenge of the Fallen remains such a divisive film. I also want to discuss the movie's place in Shia LaBeouf's career, because it's more significant than you might think. At the time of Revenge of the Fallen's release, LaBeouf was one of the biggest movie stars in the world. He had the Transformers franchise. He had Indiana Jones and The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, also produced by Spielberg, also divisive, and he was being positioned as a new generation leading man. Revenge of the Fallen represented the peak of his commercial career. He was the lead of the second highest grossing film of 2009, but it also marked the beginning of a shift. LaBeouf has been open about his dissatisfaction with the Transformers franchise, particularly with Revenge of the Fallen, which he has publicly called the worst of the series. He felt that the focus on spectacle over substance limited what he could do as an actor, and his post-Transformers career has been defined by a deliberate move toward independent and art house filmmaking. Lawless, Fury, Honey Boy, The Peanut Butter Falcon. It's an interesting trajectory, from the face of the biggest franchise in Hollywood to a committed independent actor, and Revenge of the Fallen is arguably the pivot point. Megan Fox's career trajectory is also inextricably linked to this film, though for different and more troubling reasons. Fox was let go from the franchise after Revenge of the Fallen. She was replaced by Rosie Huntington-Whiteley in Dark of the Moon, reportedly after comparing Bay to Napoleon and Hitler in an interview. The details of what happened behind the scenes have been debated and disputed over the years, but the outcome was clear. Fox's career momentum was significantly disrupted. She has spoken in subsequent years about the challenges she faced as a young woman in Hollywood, about being objectified and dismissed, and about the toll that the Transformers experience took on her personally and professionally. In retrospect, her treatment by the media and by the industry during the Revenge of the Fallen era is a sobering reminder of how Hollywood can build someone up and tear them down with equal speed. Let me take a moment to appreciate something that I think gets overlooked in discussions of Revenge of the Fallen: the stunt work. In addition to the visual effects and the practical explosions, the film features genuinely impressive physical stunts performed by real human beings. The military sequences involve real soldiers and military equipment performing real maneuvers. The car chases involve real stunt drivers. The sequences where Sam and Michaela are running through the desert while explosions go off around them involved real explosions detonated at carefully calculated distances from the actors. Shia LaBeouf actually injured his hand during filming, an injury that was written into the script, and several stunt performers put themselves in genuinely dangerous situations to create the movie's most thrilling moments. The physical bravery and skill of the stunt team is something that deserves acknowledgement, because without them, the movie's action scenes wouldn't have the same visceral impact. I've been going on for quite a while now, so let me start moving towards some final thoughts, though there's still plenty to discuss. One thing I want to address is the question of whether Revenge of the Fallen is a movie that rewards repeat viewing. And I think the answer is a qualified yes. On first viewing, the movie can be overwhelming. There's so much happening, so many characters, so many explosions, that it's easy to lose track of things and feel exhausted by the end. On repeat viewings, when you know what's coming and can relax into the experience, the movie's strengths become more apparent. You notice details in the visual effects that you missed the first time. You appreciate the choreography of the action sequences more. You pick up on small character moments, Bumblebee's emotional reactions, Jetfire's wistful nostalgia, Optimus's quiet determination that got lost in the noise on first viewing. The movie's weaknesses also become more apparent on repeat viewing. The comedy bits are even more grating when you know they're coming, and the pacing issues feel more pronounced. But overall, I think Revenge of the Fallen is a better movie on the second or third watch than it is on the first. It's the kind of movie that rewards patience and attention, which is ironic for a film that's often accused of being designed for short attention spans. Let me also discuss the cultural impact of the film, because Revenge of the Fallen left a mark on popular culture that extends beyond its box office performance. I am Optimus Prime, and I send this message to any surviving Autobots taking refuge among the stars. We are here, we are waiting. That closing narration from Optimus became iconic. The image of Optimus Prime with jetpack/armor attachments, what fans call Jet Power Optimus Prime, became one of the franchise's most popular designs and one of its best-selling toys. The forest battle became a touchstone for action scene quality, frequently cited in Best Action Scenes of the Decade lists. And the movie's broader cultural presence, the memes, the parodies, the references in other media, ensured that Revenge of the Fallen remained part of the conversation long after its theatrical run ended. The toy line associated with the film was also enormously successful, which matters because let's not forget that Transformers is, at its core, a toy franchise. Hasbro's Revenge of the Fallen toy line included hundreds of products across multiple price points and levels of complexity, from simple $5 figures for kids to elaborate $100-plus collector's editions for adult fans. The film drove toy sales that generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue for Hasbro, which is one of the main reasons the franchise has continued despite critical disapproval. As long as the movies sell toys, the movies will keep getting made. It's a symbiotic relationship between the cinematic and commercial aspects of the franchise, and Revenge of the Fallen exemplified it perfectly. The video game tie-in, Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen, developed by Luxoflux for consoles and Beenox for PC, was released alongside the film and gave players the ability to play as both Autobots and Decepticons in an open-world setting. The game was decent, not great, not terrible, but it extended the film's reach into another medium and gave fans additional ways to engage with the story and characters. The gaming tie-in model has largely fallen out of favor in recent years. Most major films no longer get dedicated video game adaptations. But in 2009, it was standard practice, and the Revenge of the Fallen game was a solid example of the form. Now, let me circle back to the filmmaking process one more time, because there's an aspect I haven't fully explored: the editing. The editor of Revenge of the Fallen was a team led by Roger Barton, Paul Rubel, Joel Negron, and Tom Muldoon. Editing a Michael Bay film is, by all accounts, an enormous and enormously challenging task. Bay shoots enormous amounts of footage. The ratio of filmed material to finished film is much higher than average, and the editors must find the narrative through mountains of coverage. For Revenge of the Fallen, the editing challenge was compounded by the script issues. With a screenplay that was still being developed during production, the editors had to shape the story in the cutting room to a greater degree than usual.